Welcome. I am Dr. Patrice Berry. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and here I share educational information on a variety of topics. And today, the case that we're going to be covering is Ruby Franke. I want to start with just a general overview of what's happened with this case. And then today, I'm going to show some clips from the hearing that she had. So Ruby Franke was a family vlogger and she had a really large, I think over 2 million followers on YouTube, and she would share things about her family. Now there was lots of controversy with her because a lot of her parenting methods and techniques, the viewers could tell were problematic. For example, removing her son's bed from his room for I think it was something like 6 months, or it was a really long period of time. He did not have a bed simply for playing a prank on his younger brother. On August 30th of this year, one of the minor children escaped from Jodi Hildebrandt's house. Now, let me show Jodi. I've done 2 videos on Jodi Hildebrandt, one on her past victims and her therapy license, and then another video on her surrendering her license to practice therapy. And within those videos, I pretty much said I was really concerned because I thought Jodi was gonna throw Ruby under the bus. And I didn't think that Ruby was going to turn on Jodi. I do think this time away, it sounds like Ruby's husband has filed for divorce because I think he wants to try to get custody of the minor children, and still being married to Ruby, who's likely going to be convicted of some type of harm towards children, that might have made it more difficult for them to be in a household together. And then I'm sure their marriage has been, because Jodi's technique seemed to be to isolate wives from their husbands, but in a way where she could then control the wives and also tell the husbands how bad they were. Do I think that Ruby is completely innocent in all of this? No. Anyone who would allow and kind of lean into some of Jodi's techniques, to some of Jodi's thoughts, to me, there has to be something there already where you're going to be okay with something like that. Because there's no way I would allow someone to restrict food from my child. There's no way I would allow somebody to physically tie up my child. There's no way I would let anyone eh, do any of those types of things to my child. I do think religion adds an interesting dynamic to this case because Jodi was given the green light by bishops within the LDS church. A lot of her clients came from bishop referrals. She was a preferred therapist, and because her techniques were not rooted in sound therapy. Even a biblical or Christian counseling, they they weren't rooted in anything that rational people would find to be helpful towards anyone else. It seemed to be her own need to control and possibly some of her own projections, her view of what was moral and what wasn't. There just things just seemed to be very twisted and distorted. And she seemed to have very, very extreme views. So while I'm waiting for the court stream to start, I saw a video that I haven't seen yet, this one about a past client. So let's go on ahead and listen to that real quick. And I'll make sure to put the full link down below.
So let's go in depth on something we talked about at the beginning here. We have brought you a lot of coverage on Ruby Franke, Jodi Hildebrandt, and the 8 passengers' allegations of child abuse. I just spoke with another individual today. She was a former client of Jodi Hildebrandt. She went there as a single person. We've told you about a lot of people that went there for couples counseling. Not the case here. She was also not there in a reference from anybody part of the church or any sort of reference there. So there's some differences here, different perspectives. This was back in 2017, 2018 or so in Southern Utah, in-person, individual and group sessions. Take a listen. Brittany, what is your experience with Jodi Hildebrandt?
So years ago, I um, was made aware of Jodi and her program and her therapy sessions, which I began in person here in St. George. Um, I felt like her style was a little bit more maybe aggressive than what I had experienced in the past, which I thought was going to be a really good thing. I then joined her women's group, our weekly group sessions. And so I did that for nearly a year.
What were those sessions like, the group sessions?
Those group sessions were myself and however many other ladies, I would say 10 to 12 regularly. Same women, and had a expectation of joining every week, not missing any weeks, 2 hour long sessions, probably similar to other group therapies where you are, checking in. You are asking for time if you need time with the group specifically. And within the group, other rules were that you had to make a minimum of 7 calls a week, and you had to be available for a minimum a week. So you were on the phone a lot with these other group members, not so much Jodi herself. If you wanted to speak to Jodi or get help from her, you had to do one-on-one private sessions and then pay additional for those.
In your individual session, right? Because I know you did the women's group, but in any of your individual sessions, when you had more of that one-on-one interaction, did anything stand out from those experiences?
The one thing that I mentioned when I did speak to other friends about her and the program, she felt extremely uncaring. It felt like transactional. The group, I got a lot of validation or help within the group. I think it was having that level of support and accountability. If you're going to be talking on the phone and talking about things for, this many hours a week, it's kind of maybe a higher likeliness to work than a 1 hour session a week with someone else. But it just was like a general feeling of uncaring. I went there in a moment of like really deep despair, if you will. And it just kind of was like, well, either sign up and pay the money or see you later, you know? And I took that again as like, well, maybe that's the difference between her and others. She's not really sympathetic or soft. It was kind of like, felt like pay the money, join the group, buy the books, buy the program, and see you later.
What I haven't asked you yet is, what are your thoughts just on this whole situation after you heard that she was arrested and on these allegations of child abuse charges?
Um, when I first saw her name in the news, I wasn't familiar with Ruby at the time, but her name is pretty specific, and I, kind of went, that can't be. And of course, it was easily identifiable to be her. I'm really shocked on the level of egregiousness, where her counseling was so much honest, humble, responsible, like almost like I said, military style of like feeding that into us as the participants, as like, you're you know you're to be this way, just like really, really, aggressively. So to hear her main motto be like completely contradictory to her life and the things that she's doing was just really astonishing.
Was there any instances of she using a shaming tactic with anybody, whether it was group or individual?
I believe so. I believe so, in the sense that, again, maybe that uncaring coming across more like shaming. If you were going to allow it to affect you, like shame on you, like that's your own problem, as though we don't have human emotions and you should basically choose to just shut that off and deal with it. There was one more particular thing that stood out to me that she spoke about in the group. It felt a bit unprofessional at times, that I think at some point maybe her license was taken away. Um, and she spoke about that kind of a lot. And I mentioned that because it was almost kind of weird that she mentioned that she was basically doing this higher duty to the world, this higher service, if you will. and that she was punished by society, in the light of like taking her licensing away. But it was interesting how many times it was mentioned. I can validate some of the male perspectives that I've been hearing. It was the narrative was very much like, if your husband is not perfect, it is your job to leave him, and he is undeserving. And if he was to be living honest, responsible, humble, these values, then he would be deserving. But it honestly, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because it reminds me, I remember telling a friend, it felt like if I had been married entering the group, I would be exiting the group as a divorced. It felt very much like, not necessarily that she hated men or marriage, but she definitely wasn't an advocate of for them. I don't know on what level of perfection one can establish, but we're all human, and it definitely felt like there was never going to be reaching her level of her own perfection and the perfection she expected within her groups.
And that is just so interesting to me because she was in no way perfect. She had major issues and concerns. I like that the former client who came forward on the news to talk about this, that she talked about how she was surprised because the main thing was be honest, responsible, to be these things, and that to learn that Jodi wasn't those things, which to me felt a lot like projection, like she was trying to live through other people and she was not aware at all. Self-awareness, not at all there. Or she had these excuses for why she was the way that she was and tried to project this confidence that really to me comes off a lot more like narcissism. So I haven't met her, I can't diagnose her. There is this entitlement and this sense of grandiosity. I'm so great. There's a way that what I'm doing is healing the world and I'm so awesome, but it's coming from this insecure place of like if you're really that awesome, you don't have to project it that way. If you are doing these great things and your license is being taken away, you don't need to talk about it in group. So I would have considered that as being unprofessional. And in this interview, she doesn't talk about why she left services. I would have been interested to know why she did. And the fact that she called her uncaring, it did come across like her style and her approach was very focused on here's the bar, reach the bar. And if you don't reach the bar, then it's because you didn't try hard enough. You're not good enough. And it's my understanding that Jodi started out as a therapist for one of the kids. I'm not sure if she met with Ruby one on one. I could imagine it sounds like that's what she would have done. So I would guess that that probably happened. And then over time, I think she realized that she could control Ruby and then also use Ruby for her own gain because Ruby was talking about connections. And to me, so Ruby, I think, was able to relate to people and was able to. No, she seemed kind of disconnected too. I was going to try to say that she seemed caring and connected, but, and the fact that the whole program's called Connections and the leader of the program comes across as unfeeling, uncaring, and disconnected. Oh. So, interested to see what happens in today's hearing. It should be starting any minute now. Let me go on ahead and get that part of the stream ready.
In the state of Utah. Ms. Franke is now here. Mr. Winward, we are scheduled for a waiver hearing. Is there going to be a waiver today?
So it's my understanding that her parents and and there were some other families, some siblings and maybe an in-law, that those are the people that she smiled at as they came in. I do not believe, based on reports I've seen, I do not believe that her ex-husband, I don't know that they're legally divorced, but I don't believe that the father of the children were there.
There will, plus a plea agreement, Your Honor.
All right.
I'll ask the bailiff to hand you what has been executed.
All right. Mr. Winward, you have discussed with Ms. Franke a preliminary hearing, what's involved in a preliminary hearing. She understands she has a right to a preliminary hearing on all of the charges in the case. She understands what the charges are, and she's prepared to waive a preliminary hearing in the case on all charges.
She is, and that is contained in this agreement on page 7 as well.
Very good.
And with waiving the preliminary hearing, this avoids the kids, this avoids everybody having to come in for all of this. She's also waiving her right to an actual hearing. I am going to skip ahead a little bit when the judge goes over each charge, because he's basically just saying you're doing this of your own will, nobody's forcing you to do this, all of that.
Any further record, counsel?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Winward, we ready to proceed?
We are ready to proceed.
All right, then. Ms. Franke, how do you plead to count 1, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
To count 3, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
To count 5, aggravated.
All right, so from watching Dr. G and from watching behavioral arts, I have learned that a lot of eye closing, so that is our body's natural reaction to when we're hearing things that we're just that we're trying to keep out when we're hearing something distressing, that sometimes our eyes will close. I do see a little bit of that there. I am not a body language expert. Please go to those channels for like expert body language analysis.
Child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
And to count 6, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
With my deepest regret and sorrow for my family and my children. Guilty.
So she added that part. With my deepest sorrow, with my deepest regret, I plead guilty. And so that was the gist of that. At the end, they are going to set sentencing. I'll be interested to know what the sentencing will be, because it's my understanding that these will run consecutive. So she's been charged with 4 felony counts. She's pled guilty to, I want to say 4 felony counts, because it was count 1, count 3. Let me pull up my notes on that. Count 5 and count 6, that she pled guilty to those. And it's my understanding the count that was dropped, they were related to malnourishment. I learned that over on Emily D. Baker's stream. I will link her lawyer coverage of this down below as well.
Oh.
As
Ruby Franke did exactly what we thought she was going to do today. She pled guilty to the charges, and I do believe there's some type of plea agreement. And then she has sentencing coming up on February 20th. Now, right now, we don't know the details of the plea agreement. I do believe this means that she will be testifying against Jodi Hildebrandt. And in this case, so I still think Ruby should be held responsible for her role in this, even if she did have this former licensed therapist that was giving her these recommendations. I do think she thought she had the support of a therapist. So if I, as a therapist, if a client comes to me and they say they're going to keep their child locked in their room for 8 hours a day, and I'm like, oh, okay. Like that's like based on everything, like, yes, that's an adequate treatment. Then legally, I do think there would be some level of protection. I do think the issue for Jodi is it sounds like her license had been suspended in the past. And at that point, to me, it didn't sound like she was calling what she was doing therapy. It sounds like she switched to the unregulated coaching. And still, I would still think that, oh, she used to have her license. Oh, society, she lost it. If I'm in Ruby's mind, I'm trying to get into the mind of somebody that would allow something like this to happen. I think Ruby wanted help and support with her kids. And I think what she really needed someone to do is to sit down and say, like, hey, it's normal for kids to do these things. I think you have some unrealistic expectations of a 6-year-old. So I have a 6-year-old and he is not responsible for packing his lunch. Now, sometimes he helps me
With putting things in his lunch, I might have him look at it and be like, "Okay, do you have everything you need?" If for some reason, if he left his lunch at home, I would make sure that he had a lunch at school, and I would be totally okay. If the school gave him a lunch and I had to pay for it, that would not be a problem. I want my child fed. Now, if my child is 14 or 15, if they're older, then I guess sometime but for an older child, you might have a natural consequence of, "Oh, you you left your lunch." I would wanna make sure that that child doesn't have any developmental concerns or any neurospiciness because sometimes I might have a 14-year-old, but if they have severe ADHD, they might still forget and need reminders, and they might still need some extra help and support from the parent. 'Cause I even remember being a kid and I didn't make my lunch and my mom, she never let me go hungry. I would be able to buy school lunch or she had a big jar. She had a jar of money, and I just had to let her know that I went in there and I took money out for lunch, but she never would have been like, "Oh, you're stealing from me because you took money for lunch because we didn't have any lunch meat or because you didn't have what you needed to make your lunch." This is a difficult case because there's a part of me that feels sorry for Ruby and her family, and yet at the same time, like I said, I do think that she should be held accountable. I don't think she ever wanted it to go this far, and I don't know that she was aware of what had happened to Jessie and what she had done to her own niece and the harm that had been caused in the past. I honestly don't think that Ruby was aware of that. Now, I'll never know, okay? I don't know what she was and was not aware of. Within some religious traditions, I've seen people have this view of discipline being about pain, and I've known of individuals or I've worked with people that took it too far, and then social services gets involved and all those things. For the sake of the kids, because that's the other part of this that I haven't really talked about as much. With the mom pleading guilty, that spares her 2 children, the 2 that were most impacted, the ones that these charges are based on. It protects them from having to testify, at least in her trial. They will likely still have to testify in Jodi's trial if they do end up going all the way to trial. And I saw in the comments somewhere, someone mentioned there might be something for Jodi next week. I don't know. I will definitely keep an eye on it. I am embracing the fact that this channel is going very court and entertainment heavy, and I will still do videos on other topics and the court stuff will kind of take priority or will be like a bigger part of the channel in 2024. I am planning to do a year in review video where I will talk about some of my favorite cases and how really the court stuff is what helped me be able to upgrade certain things with my channel and it really just helped me shift my focus in a way that when I started this channel back in 2020, I did not plan to be doing this. I'm grateful that you all enjoy this education, that you all enjoy this aspect. Parenting can be hard, and I do definitely, when parents just desperately want help and support, I want them to be able to have legit sources where they can get that support and to make sure that they're not taking an advice that's going to do more harm. If you all have any more questions about this case, I like answering your questions in full videos or in shorts. Let me know. Make sure to like the video. If you're not subscribed and you want more content like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.